So hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the inaugural session of the GBBC's University Dialogues in partnership with Miami University Blockchain Club. My name is Sophia Aaron, and I am the GBBC's Communications and Content Lead. We're so pleased to have you here with us today. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the Global Blockchain Business Council, otherwise known as the GBBC, is the leading global industry association for the blockchain technology ecosystem, with over 250 institutional members and 130 ambassadors from over 70 jurisdictions and disciplines. So the university dialogues are really designed to build bridges between students and innovative companies and leaders in the blockchain space to foment blockchain understanding, skills, and opportunities at academic institutions around the world. We are really pleased to have partnered with Miami University Blockchain Club on this event and would like to thank our partners also at Michigan Blockchain, Elon Blockchain, and the Tufts Blockchain Club for spreading the word on their campuses about this event. We hope that the students today will really enjoy it. We have the pleasure to be joined today by many leaders in the blockchain space to discuss enterprise blockchain and digital assets. So our speakers today are B. O'Carroll, CEO of Nautilus Tech, Justin Rice, VP of Ecosystem at the Stellar Development Foundation, Tanya Shastri, Vice President of Products at VMware Blockchain, and David Treat, Senior Managing Director at Accenture. And our moderator today is Sandra Ro. So if you have questions today, please drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will take them throughout. I'd like to invite Alex Stan, President of the Miami University Blockchain Club, to say a few words before we kick off. Alex, if you can hear us, I'll hand things over to you.
Yeah, hopefully everyone can hear and see me. I was having some technical difficulties earlier, but hopefully those are resolved now. I switched over to my phone. Hopefully that fixed things. But yeah, so my name's Alex Stan, and I'm the current president at the Miami University Blockchain Club. And if you haven't heard anything about the Miami University Blockchain Club, we actively facilitate the understanding of blockchain technology through conferences, hackathons, research and development, and all that kind of stuff. And I'd like to have a big thank you to GBBC for helping put everything together, along with our partner universities, and of course the speakers. I know this is going to be a great event. I've been looking forward to it for a while, so might as well just get right into it, and I hope everyone else enjoys it as well.
Thanks so much, Alex, and over to you, Sandra, to kick us off.
Great. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Alex. And I am so delighted to be alongside some of the most illustrious, pioneering leaders in the blockchain space. I'm going to dive right in to start off and ask B. O'Carroll, who has been mentioned already as the CEO of Nautilus Tech. Could you please let us know what you do at Nautilus and what Nautilus is, and then we'll go on from there next to Justin after that, and so forth and so on. So B, start us off.
Thank you, Sandra. So Nautilus Tech is an OTC desk that helps individuals and corporate entities trade from cryptocurrency into fiat currency. So when they're looking to buy or sell large amounts of about 12 to 15 different coins, it's too large to go on exchange, they would use a desk and trade off exchange. I've been in the OTC crypto trading space since 2015, and before that I worked in traditional finance on Wall Street.
Great. And just for those who are not as familiar, on the trading side, OTC means over-the-counter trading, and B will talk a bit about that a bit more later. But off to Justin next.
Thanks, Sandra. I am Justin Rice. I'm the VP of Ecosystem at the Stellar Development Foundation. The Stellar Development Foundation, SDF, as I'll probably call it, is a nonprofit organization that supports the growth and development of the Stellar Network. The Stellar Network is an open source, open participation blockchain network that connects the world's financial institutions and services. It makes it easy to issue a digital asset that represents a fiat currency and to use features that are built in at the protocol level to exchange and make payments with those assets. And a lot of businesses and developers build on Stellar, and part of my role is to help them understand how to optimize their use of the network and also to explain to them how it works. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Tanya?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Tanya Shastri. I'm VP of Product at VMware. And for those who aren't familiar with VMware, VMware is a technology company providing software and infrastructure to other enterprises so that they can deploy, manage, run any application. That's, the company position is we want to allow companies to run and manage any application on any cloud, on any device. And we're extending that to the blockchain space. So bringing a blockchain platform to our enterprise customers and the enterprise ecosystem so that they can run and operate and manage decentralized applications more effectively in the enterprise context. And looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you. And Dave Treat, who, by the way, wears many different roles or has many different roles in the space. He's also the GBBC board chair. So we're delighted to have Dave with us today. He is a very busy person. So thank you.
Thanks, Sandra, for having me and with such a great group. So I founded and still lead our blockchain and multi-party systems business at Accenture. We are, for those of you who don't know who Accenture is, we're one of the largest technology services companies in the world. Do everything from the strategy to the design, implementation, integration of platforms and capabilities in the blockchain multi-party space, all the way through to operating businesses on behalf of our clients or operating blockchain-based ecosystems. So we are specifically not a product company. We work with and develop deep partnerships with all of the leading platform companies out there, and have built up a business that focuses around digital currency, financial infrastructure, digital identity, and supply chain as our three main areas of focus.
Right. Well, there's a lot there, Dave, and we're going to actually ask you the first question to kick off. The blockchain and digital assets landscape has really changed quite a bit in the last 5 years. Actually, I would argue in the last 6 months to a year. But if you could just kind of lay out for the audience here, what are some of the highlights of some of the changes that you've seen? And then we'll also go to the rest of our panelists to opine on that. How much has the landscape changed?
Yeah, it's interesting. Certainly what's in the public domain has changed drastically, but your Freudian slip there, I would think, was spot on. When we founded the blockchain business at Accenture in 2015, after it having lived in our Accenture labs applied research context for 2 or 3 years, our very first client was a central bank. We've been working on central bank digital currency since 2015, and it was by definition very quiet, right? Central banks are a conservative bunch. When you're talking about systemically important infrastructure and talking about the money of a nation, it was very, very quiet. But there's been a lot of activity, and he will hear from some of the other panelists that this has been a multi-year journey that I would call it 18 months ago hit a whole different tenor. Certainly with China's announcement, with Libra, with the more kind of public activities in the digital currency space. And then, of course, in the past 6 months, it just has further exploded. I think it was a huge high watermark. What was it, just 4 weeks ago, to have both Jay Powell and Janet Yellen in a U.S. context declare that central bank digital currency is a priority for the U.S. financial infrastructure, right? So, around the world, you're seeing the BIS has put out a report last fall that said 80% of the world's central banks are working on it. You've got that huge focus on central bank digital currency. For years now, we've had phenomenal innovation on the stablecoin and private enterprise issued currencies, and the interplay between those two wildly phenomenal. And then I'm leaving out the most obvious public focus around the resurgence of valuation in the cryptocurrency space that has kicked off in the certainly in the past 3 months. So I think what has changed is the public awareness. I think that what has been consistent is phenomenal innovation and partners and players coming together to drive this wave of innovation. The last thing I'll say is, if I take a giant step back and reflect on what's happening, particularly if you think about it from a financial services perspective, we moved from paper to electronic in the 90s and 2000s. We've lived in that context for 20 years of electronic balances being reconciled. And now the whole industry and then all of its extensions, we're moving from electronic to tokenized. And so, taking that wide frame on it, the fundamental, we're working to upgrade the core capital markets infrastructure, global payments infrastructure, both at the systemically important, SIFI level as well as the private enterprise level. So massive wave of innovation, huge public discourse about it now. I think it's just fantastic.
And I'll add to that, if anyone thinks it's too late or it's already been going on for so long, there's no opportunities, you will find out today that we've only just begun. B, I would love for you to talk a little bit about and piggyback off of what Dave said around just the explosion in crypto. And then we'll go to Justin as well to opine on that, because Stellar has been around for a while. But B, please tell us what you've seen in the markets around crypto, currencies, stable coins, et cetera.
So I would piggyback off David exactly and say that in addition to the change in public awareness, there's been an incredible shift in perception. When we started 5 years ago, in 2015, I was still having a lot of conversations with people like, but I thought it's just for drug dealers, and like, really, what are you doing? And why did you quit your really good job to do this? Whereas those conversations are not happening now, right? Like the perception has gone to a completely different level. Also, to echo what David said in terms of the people being able to discern between projects. So Stellar has obviously been around since the very beginning. Their team has a really strong pedigree, that they're actually achieving stuff. The difference between sort of what was happening in 2017 with an explosion of projects where people were really not equipped maybe to discern between what were they doing and why, and what was the point of it. I think we've come a really long way there too. And that's directly impacted the valuations, the liquidity, and how people can get involved in understanding.
Thank you so much for that. And Justin, could you please give us a Stellar point of view on the evolution of this space? It's been an amazing journey.
Yeah, Stellar has been around since 2014. It's sort of one of the early L1 solutions, and it's always been focused on payments. So I think that what David and B said is very, very true. The conversation has changed, public awareness has changed. From my point of view, looking at what's happening on the Stellar network, what's interesting is that we're also actually seeing use. When Stellar was first a concept, an idea, and all of these early sort of blockchains, there was a lot of potential, and there was a conversation about the potential, and obviously that shifted. More people see the potential, but what we see every day is more and more people that are issuing stable coins on Stellar and who are transacting, doing cross-border payment transactions. Oftentimes, the actual end users of those transactions don't even think about the fact that they're using blockchain, right? There are solutions that take advantage of blockchain in the background and that use its sort of efficiency and its safety because of its decentralized nature, and just its ability to sort of interoperate amongst all the currencies of the world. Like we on Stellar in the past year have seen almost a 2,000% increase in those kinds of transactions. So we went from potential to actual use. And I feel like over the past 6 months or a year, that's the biggest change that I've seen.
Wonderful. Well, you've answered one of the audience's questions directed at you about the network effect and scaling. So that's great to hear that you've had so much growth. We started off talking about lots of different areas, but enterprise blockchain is incredibly important, and that landscape has also evolved. Tanya, could you talk to us a little bit about what has happened on the enterprise side? Do you have more customers? Curious, wanting to know? No. Please tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, likewise, right, on the enterprise side, I think similar things have happened. And I'd say twofold. One is the understanding and the appreciation for what the technology can do. So it's, the hype cycle that we talk about, there was a time when everyone was interested in just understanding what this is. And there'd be a lot of very open-ended conversations to now much more, there's a clear idea of what this technology can do for them, and much more focused around how do we get this to production? How do we make this real, right? So there's one, that appreciation and the understanding. And the second is really the technology, right? The technology itself, being able to bring it into the enterprise context. So there are different requirements on the enterprise side from the public side, right? There are things like privacy, things like performance, things like the ability to manage and operate these things more easily, being able to have kind of a consortium of users who can use this together, right? So there are various aspects on the technology side as well. And when these two both come together, the appreciation for what the technology can do and the technology being made available in a way that enterprises can consume it more effectively, those two have come together much more. So I'd say our conversations have shifted dramatically from what and why to how and when, and how do we make this real, right? So that transition is very much what we see already, and much more around bringing things to production now than ideation previously.
Thanks for that. I really appreciate you guys all providing the fact that, frankly, it's not been a linear growth, but we've seen tremendous amounts of growth. There have been fits and starts in different industries, but reality is everything's kind of, all boats are rising. And with that backdrop, we have, and I'm going to stay on the enterprise topic for a moment, Tanya. When you think about the fact that VMware has now created a solution specifically to address, blockchain needs and services of your customer base, how do you approach, selling that product? And I'm careful with the word using selling, because frankly, your clients are also asking for it. It's not like you're doing a hard sell, but how do you go about saying, or even offering a blockchain solution for an enterprise client?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? One of the points I wanted to make with the last question, but it's equally relevant here, is a lot of the enterprise customers are looking at this as a transformational thing that's happening, and it's not just a year or 2 year trajectory, right? They're looking at this transformation that can be a decade plus kind of a transformation on their end, and the value that it could bring on so many levels, right? So our approach, and the approach is not so much selling as understanding what a customer requires. There's a lot of co-innovation that we talk about with our customers, and we go deep with our customers, because at the end of the day, that's how we can bring meaningful outcomes, right? So our approach right now is, we've got, I'd say, the right ingredients. One is a lot of technical strength. So we have a very good research team. A lot of this has come out organically out of VMware research. We have some, scalable Byzantine fault tolerant core research that our enterprise product has been built on. We have a lot of strengths in the financial services space. VMware has decades of enterprise presence. So, our customers trust us. They know that we can go on an innovation journey with them that's, multi-decade long even, right? So we use that approach really, and we're in it together with them. It's quite a bit of a partnership more than a customer vendor relationship on the blockchain side for sure. And it's just fascinating how bringing together the strengths of these multiple parties, right? We bring the technology, our customers are bringing a deep knowledge of the use cases, the end-to-end financial market infrastructure. How do you insert innovation into the end-to-end existing frameworks, right? So there's a lot of complexity and a lot of vectors, and innovation isn't always clean, but it's always fun. So so long as we're committed to the journey, I think we'll all succeed, which is what we're seeing happening now.
Well said. It's not always cut and dry and clear and clean, as you say, of a process. Dave, you are able to see across so many different areas of innovation. Could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing from clients on the enterprise side? What kinds of needs? Is it now still partially education as well as the doing and the development of projects? What do you see right now in terms of demand?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It varies by industry. Certainly financial services got off first and fastest. And there is a life cycle to it. So in the early phases of it, it was a ton of education, and a lot of, one of the things that we immediately pivoted away from was education around the technology. Like you have to have a base knowledge of what the tech is all about. But that immediately pivoted away from don't get lost in the technology for what the value is, and how does it actually transform an entire ecosystem. And so within financial services, that life cycle is now fully baked, right? If I don't think I'll ever, I don't think we'll do another proof of concept in the financial services space. We're well beyond proof of concept and pilots, right? Right now, we're working with the vast majority of core clearing infrastructure players around the planet, the likes of DTCC, SDX, HKX, et cetera, embarking on actually the production implementations of moving us in capital markets to directly exchange tokenized assets for tokenized cash, right? That's well underway. We've proved performance, we've proved functionality. It's now around the tough part becomes around the governance model, the governance model, the operating model, the mechanisms by which you're going to develop the new standards that are associated with it. It's a lot of the people and operational stuff that wraps around it that's the tough part. There are other industries that are just at the beginning, and there's or earlier in that cycle where there's still quite a bit of education left to go. Generally speaking, the progress is interesting from our perspective. Being a consulting firm, right? We've always traditionally brought a thing to a client. Right? How am I serving my individual client? And of course, that's antithetical to what this wave of innovation is, because this is all about how do you transform an entire industry by engaging with a set of clients. And so a lot of what we focus on and what we do is identify those leaders within an industry ecosystem or cutting across ecosystems that have the positioning and the ability to rally the consortia that can actually build a platform that can then transform the whole industry. So from a demand perspective, the killer use cases, the first wave of killer use cases are now reaching that maturity level. We'll talk, given the great panel we have here, we'll talk, I'm sure, a lot more around, the global payments infrastructure, that, as one of the clear killer use cases. One of the questions in the chat talks about one of the other ones, which is we've always tackled the space of supply chain, trade finance, and procurement as three separate domains, which is silly because at the end of the day, all three of those domains are still focused on the same palette of widgets that a buyer and seller have purchased. And so we're seeing from a demand perspective, just incredible cross-industry engagement now, dropping all of the orthodoxies around how things work today and fundamentally rethinking that end-to-end business flow across an ecosystem, which is just a ton of fun.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. You actually hit upon some major thematics. If you guys forget everything else that we talk about today, I think one of the key points to make about blockchain technology and all the tokenization that's going on is it's a collaborative technology. It's not like I build it, you come and I will sell it to you. That old model, it's an old model. And I'm going to have Justin talk a bit more about that. As a collaborative technology, what are you seeing as sort of the best use cases or use cases that you want to highlight, and how does that collaboration work within a Stellar network?
Great question. And it is true. Collaboration is at the heart of making blockchain work. Essentially, Stellar is a great example. It's an open public network. And in order for it to connect different players in the world or different current financial rails, right? You have to have multiple people who can interoperate and interact. And so I think right now, the goals are to try to create standards that allow interoperation and to do it in a way that allows people to comply with local laws and regulations and to make sure that they're abiding by consumer protection standards, right, and laws. And so I think on the Stellar network, there is a great amount of effort that is put into not only getting assets tokenized on the network, but also to creating layers that allow people to communicate, share necessary information in order to interoperate in a compliant fashion. And I think that's sort of one general example. If you look at a lot of the rails, a lot of the payment corridors that are set up on Stellar, they will always involve at least two parties in a transaction, each of whom has integrated with the network, discovered one another, and use these interoperation standards in order to make a payment across borders and across currencies. But that's just one example of sort of a whole transaction that happens on Stellar. I mean, another thing that has happened recently on Stellar is that USDC, which is a USD asset issued by Accenture, which is a consortium They issued USDC on Stellar and on Ethereum, on Solana, and on Algorand, right? And so they have an asset that not only interoperates with all of the assets on the Stellar network, but suddenly connects Stellar to all these other blockchains. And I feel like we're at an era where a single blockchain solution, a single network is probably not going to move the entire future forward. And so all these different ideas and all these open networks, finding ways for them to connect and interoperate will allow this whole new world of innovation to sort of connect together in order to really achieve the results that everyone's hoping for. It will start to revolutionize industries. Again, for me in Stellar, we're mostly looking at that in terms of payments and specifically cross-border payments, but you can imagine that being applied to other industries as well. I think it's interoperation, not just within a chain, but across chains.
Absolutely.
If I can, sorry, Sandra, if I can pile onto that point, again, for anyone who's interested, right, there's a specific project within the Linux Hyperledger community focused exactly on what was just talked about around interoperability. So if you want to just get hands dirty with code and contribute, Hyperledger Cactus is an open source place to go focus on being able to contribute to that critically important construct. I couldn't agree more with how Justin framed it. So if you want, some of the questions talk about how to get involved. Contributing to open source is a great way to do it.
Absolutely. And we're going to dig deeper for the students out there who are interested in how do you get jobs, how do you learn about this. We'll talk about that in a minute or two, but we're going to go to B because she and firms like hers play an incredibly important function on the trading of a lot of these instruments or tokens. B, can you just tell us a bit about how you are seeing from an interoperability and a collaboration standpoint, how is this coming together? And from a trading perspective, well, Coinbase just went direct listed on NASDAQ. There's been some big milestones. Can you just give some commentary to the students out there for what's going on the exchange and trading side?
Okay, so on the exchange and trading side, it's been, will come as no surprise. So it's a very momentum driven market, right? Like it's all about flow, and it's kind of, what are the use cases? Who's trading this? Why do you need it? What are the motivating factors for people getting involved, right? So Elon Musk tweeting about Bitcoin and Coinbase going public and a lot of buzz around NFTs and DeFi and people needing to buy Ether to be able to trade on some of these platforms has really driven a lot of the interest and excitement and some of the flow that's been around. So in terms of like, the Coinbase listing kind of got a whole segment of people who really were kind of shying away from the crypto space, who reached out to me that I hadn't talked to since my old job, going like, hey, so what does this mean? So that I can buy Coinbase equity, and then the next step for me is now I can buy this Bitcoin, and I guess it's not just for drug dealers anymore, right? So that's really cool. And then from a collaboration standpoint, further to this sort of open source development on the tech side of things, on the trading side of things, we play a really important role in keeping a lot of these projects going, right? So, and from both a project level at the foundation, so like the Stellar Development Foundation also has a whole number of team of developers that work for them. In many of the projects, these developers have been compensated fully or partially in their token. So it's really important for both the foundation to be able to pay their legal bills, for example, in fiat, because unfortunately right now as it stands, some lawyers will take crypto, but many of them won't. So they need to cash out some of their coin. And that's where a company like ours comes in, and some of the other trading desks. We sort of act as the copper pipe between the pure tech crypto world and all the really cool, amazing stuff that's being built over there, and the traditional world of actually need cold hard cash to pay my rent, to go buy a cup of coffee, to like whatever, because inherently, in addition to the fact that the infrastructure is not there, you have this price volatility and this market risk, right? So like people, I hear a lot, well, I can't buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin. I'm like, well, I wouldn't buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin, because you could have, you bought a cup of coffee with Bitcoin in the beginning of December, that would be a really expensive cup of coffee that you had right now. So it's kind of, it's an interesting spot for us to sit in, because we can see it coming from the equity, like you said, and Coinbase being listed, the developers that work with Justin and who needs to get in there, the enterprises that are talking to David and might need to purchase a large amount of crypto to keep their blockchain project going. So it's very, very cool to watch it all kind of come together in that collaborative kind of framework.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one thing that you guys have all sort of really mentioned is, you know, the kind of collaborative open nature, you know, environment that we're in means also that the information is very accessible. So a lot of the information is free. If you guys were to point to information that people could access to learn, what mediums would you choose? So since you're right here, let's just say, what would you go to? My answer, I'm gonna start off. My answer would be follow people on Twitter. If you happen to be on Twitter, there is a lot of noise, but there's also a lot of good information that comes very quickly if you are a Twitter person.
Yes, I would say finding the right people on Twitter. Sandra, you totally clicked on that because there's a lot of people that you can get a little distracted. I generally send people to YouTube. One of the things I love about our space is that it's really accessible. And if you show an interest, you can actually find and reach out to people. I would suggest that you reach out to everyone on this panel on LinkedIn and connect with them and ask questions. Andreas Antonopoulos is someone who has a very good YouTube channel specifically focused on Bitcoin. It's a really good entryway that I send people to understand the why, the concepts of it. You can find people from each of the projects. Many of the projects have their own channels. And just watch little clippets in here. And then when you read about somebody interesting that said something, reach out to them on Twitter, on whatever platform there, and be like, hey, I thought that was really cool. I'd love to hear more about it. You'll be very surprised at the amount of people that will come back and actually be like, cool, thanks. And try reading this. And then I would also say trying to keep up on the media channels, at least in my world. The Block Crypto is a respected news outlet. CoinDesk is another one. Just to keep an idea, finger on the pulse of like what's going on both in the traditional world and deep in the crypto world.
I might add on the technology side, right? Those who are interested in getting deep on the technology side, it is because the world is so open in this case, and there is so much collaboration and even open sourcing almost required to build the trust. There's a lot of interesting, all the projects have a lot of good documentation. We ourselves, VMware, have open sourced the core technology in Project Concord. There's documentation that goes along with it. So there's a lot of good technical information out there that every project almost requires to put out. So those who are interested in understanding the bits and bytes, there's plenty on GitHub and various other sources that you can find.
I was going to say GitHub too, because I feel like if you find projects that interest you and you actually look at their code repository, even if you're not a super technical coder, a lot of the time it's pretty interesting. And as like a lot of the times that those docs, the documentation that Tanya just mentioned, that stuff is also open source. And I'll tell you, like today, I look at all the pull requests on GitHub for the Stellar documentation. And I found, you know, today was a day where someone who had very few GitHub contributions was reading through the documentation, just found a small error, you know, corrected it. They have now contributed to this great open source project. It's that accessible, which is really, really cool.
It really is. Dave, anything you want to add on where people can go to learn?
Yeah, and I, at the risk of, I'll mix it up and not just talk my own book, but you know, certainly if you go to any of the consulting firms' sites and you know their blockchain part, that we're putting out papers left, right, and center. I will reinforce your link here at the GBB site. The GBBC papers and contributions have always been fantastic, so those are great reads. On digital currency, I'm one of the directors of the Digital Dollar Project. We put out a paper last year. We're actually coming out with some new stuff relatively soon, but that was a culmination of a lot of our insights from the global work we've done globally with now actually we've hit the majority of the G20 central banks. So the Digital Dollar Project you know, piece, and then the World Economic Forum's put out a couple of good pieces we've contributed to. In particular, it's a small piece, but the Presidio Principles are worth reading. And then there's links off of that from a forum perspective. The GSMI initiative. And then I guess, one of the, sorry, there's a huge list, but yeah, certainly if you're just starting out, I think the list that's been shared and what I just, gave is probably a good starting point. I can put some of the links in if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, feel free to add in links. We're having a chat and video conversation. We're like multitasking here. I'm going to actually try, and I know we've been bouncing around a little bit. We're getting a lot of cool questions. We are going to talk about CBDCs in a moment, but I do want to sort of answer some of these direct questions and some of them being particularly focused on. So I'm going to ask Tanya to answer this one. If blockchain is such a new and promising field, will I see change in careers for software engineers in the future? Like for now, it's not very common for to see a blockchain engineer opening. What are your thoughts on that, Tanya?
Yeah, again, of course, personally, I have made an investment in the space, right? I do really believe there is a long horizon here, and there is going to be a wave. There already is, from my standpoint. We are looking for people. Several of our partners and others are looking for good folks in the space. I do expect that there will be a requirement. Justin's putting his hand up as well. For both technologists as well as business folks who have an appreciation for this. There are already a lot of universities providing coursework. I think it's all valuable. Like just earlier today, we were on a chat with Syracuse University that has a blockchain specific curriculum. So look out for it. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in the space, not just using the open source and getting your hands, into the GitHubs of the world and so on. Actually taking some coursework is not a bad idea. I think that would be a good complement to any other entrepreneurial sides of aspirations that you have.
And building on that, another question was related to internship opportunities. Many of our students are still in school, but for the summer, they may be available. How should one go about internships? Should they go look for cool projects and see if they're hiring interns? What do you guys recommend?
Yeah, maybe I'll just take a quick stab at that. And again, I come from a very technical viewpoint. So I'd say my approach, if it was personally for me, I do look for, the core technology, how established is the product from a technical value proposition versus the buzz, right? Buzz can come and go, but if there's a good value proposition, I think I'd suggest, in a way, whether it succeeds or not, just learning in the space is already valuable. So an internship in the space generally is a good idea. Going where there is some genuine value being created is great. You benefit from that for your next step, right? And being aware of the industry is already a good thing.
If I could just jump in there from a trading and a market standpoint, I would say most of the people that I've heard and that we've worked with who've gotten internships, Sandra, are exactly what you said. Like they've just been reading, they come across somebody in an article, they find out about the company, like, hey, I would love to work with you. But I would encourage you that to get a little bit more specific, like, why would you like to work with that person? What do you think you could do to help them? What's so cool about their company to actually make yourself stand out from the crowd? We are all working 24/7 because all of the markets are all 24/7. Everybody needs help. And there's lots of people that are like, oh, wow, that's cool. I think I want to do it. And quite frankly, it's really difficult to be like, okay, let me get on the phone call and figure out what we can do with you. If you come to me and say like, hey, B, I'm really good at interpreting data. I'm great at doing spreadsheets. I was reading that you said this, I could come up with that. And I'm happy to open mail, whatever you need me to do, let's talk. I'm going to write you back. Because I can do something with you immediately. And we all are looking for interest and hunger and enthusiasm and motivation. And let's just do this and build and go.
Absolutely. Dave, Justin, any advice you want to add?
My favorite story, I sit on the board of the Linux Hyperledger project. So I'm just for transparency. We had, again, in any of these open source communities, your ability to step up and contribute, don't hesitate. My favorite story is there was someone who basically contributed a paper, submitted it to be part of one of the conferences, spoke at the conference. My team was so wowed by the presentation that they gave that we held the first interview for them later that afternoon. because he got off stage and rushed over, and I don't think we were alone, but you know, literally, you know, we went from we went from the speech that they gave to an interview within hours, and they joined weeks later. So I don't hesitate to be bold about contributing. There's the uncovered space, that's not the right term, the green space to tackle here is vast, right? So you can pick dimensions of this. There's a ton more research and contributions to be made. And I would, you know, pick any of the open source communities and dive in and just contribute. And it's a great way to both get noticed and to build a network and to find opportunities.
Yep. And Justin, you actually have a direct question. The handle is Emmy Real is saying, hey, I'm wondering if Stellar Development Foundation was looking for interns.
It's a really good question. I want to sort of reiterate what B said, which is that yes and no, right? We are looking for interns. When an intern comes to us who stands out, who has not only enthusiasm, but a sort of specific idea of what they might be able to do, and really ideally a well-scoped project, right? Because you've got 3 months or so, like say it's a summer internship, you've got 3 months. If you want the internship and you show up and you say, here's what I want to do in 3 months, here's my well-scoped project, it becomes a lot easier. Like first, it shows that you care, it shows that you put in the time, it shows that you understand what's going on. It also becomes an easier, let's bring this person on, because then it's suddenly clear. You don't have to fumble around for a month trying to figure out how to like sort of come up with a project. So showing up with a well-scoped project, pretty hard to deny, you know?
Fantastic. Well, look, I encourage the panelists where there are direct questions to you that are a little bit more technical in nature or direct in nature to answer them, because I'm going to move on to CBDCs, if that's all right. We only have about 20 minutes left. So let's talk about central bank digital currencies. I want, Dave, if you could just kick us off. You mentioned Digital Dollar Project. What is it? Where are we? And you've got a couple of questions here about China and e-yuan or e-renminbi. Can you address at least some of the landscape right now?
Yeah, so as I said, our very first client was a central bank when we formed the team back in 2015. We have worked with the majority of the G20 central banks at this point. You know, in the public domain, we're currently building Sweden's Riksbank, you know, platform. We've done work with everyone from, you know, the ECB to, you know, to I guess, sorry, I've got to pause on what's in the public domain. So the digital dollar projects, we've done work with a lot of the central banks around the world, but what had not really kicked off as of, you know, 14, 15 months ago was any productive progress in the US context. There was still very much a hesitancy in the U.S. context at that point. So I have had a longstanding relationship with Chris Giancarlo, who's the former CFTC chairman. Chris and I were both at the Singapore FinTech Festival over breakfast and lamenting the fact of we're hearing and presenting and talking about all the wonderful progress that's being made, particularly in ASEAN. And we basically said, look, let's, you know, he had just published a piece in the Wall Street Journal around this, and we said, look, let's get it moving. So we formed the Digital Dollar Project a year ago, January, with the sole intent as a philanthropic, you know, we're donating our time and energy to it, philanthropic activity to get the discourse going, the dialogue going in the United States around it. So we published a paper which summarized our findings and results for how we think you know, it best plays out for central banks and some of the definitions and terms and constructs. We've been working on the Hill with a number of members of Congress around legislation. We testified before Congress 3 times last summer with the Senate Banking Committee and the like. One of the requests that came out of that congressional testimony was a call for more specifics around pilots. And I'm at the risk of getting myself in trouble. I'm just going to leave it at hopefully at some point in the coming weeks, months. you'll see more about a structure for launching functional pilots to complement what the Boston Fed and MIT have already kicked off around a very great focus on the underpinning technology and all the way down to the specific language in Project Hamilton. So we're hopeful we'll be making some announcements soon around structures for how we carry forward with pilots in the U.S. context, and again, it'll be on a very open basis, with an emphasis on the transparency, sharing, and collaboration. Because at the end of the day, this is central bank digital currency by definition, right? Just to put it out there, is it's systemically important infrastructure. It has, it is a manifestation of the policies and values and statements of a country, and there are some wild divergence around issues like privacy and others around that play out in the nature of the currency and how it plays out in a payments ecosystem. And so it's going to be, it needs to be a public-private partnership in each country, but for the Digital Dollar Project focused on the U.S. as to what are we going to value and how are we going to design it so that it meets our societal expectations, our risk expectations, the operational expectations, all of what you would expect from core infrastructure of a country around its coin of the realm is a real construct. So please read the paper if you have comments or suggestions. It's a very open project. We're looking for any and all contributors.
There you go, an opportunity. I'm going to go to Tanya and ask, CBDCs, you work with a lot of financial institutions, many are your clients. What are you seeing from a CBDC perspective? Has it affected you and enterprise solutions so far?
Yeah, so, I think we mentioned a little bit about kind of the life cycle of certain projects and so on, right? So I'd say CBDC, there's, again, a lot more clarity in what and how, and the wholesale side of it, the retail side of it, and so on, right? There's various aspects of the CBDC that we're making a lot of progress on. I think some of these things require a lot more of the regulatory clarity, clarity with the central banks for how they would make this happen, how would they interact with other banks, so on and so forth, right? So some of these things just take longer to really finally materialize, but a lot of acceleration there, and Dave and Accenture certainly doing a lot of good work in that space as well. Will something happen? Yes. When exactly will it happen? I think that's more of the question to answer now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Justin, we know that you guys are doing some CBDC projects, but I want to go to B from a trading and how does this, CBDCs get launched, and how would that work with stable coins and cryptocurrencies? Could you just unpack that a little bit for the audience?
I can try. I personally I'm still trying to get my head around how to think about this. I fall more on the privacy end of things. So I was taking notes when David was talking, and I want to make sure that I get involved with the Digital Dollar Project and have my voice heard, because I have some serious concerns around that. And how do you do this fairly, right? And how do you maintain privacy, and how do you get this in the hands of people who aren't fluent in this, right? So I'm still trying to, I feel like in general, our space is like, yay, CBDCs. And I'm like, wait, hold on. I don't need you to know everything I'm doing with every dollar that I have in my pocket. How are we going to make sure that this is done in the right manner? In terms of stable coins, it starts to get, I'm also really interested in the interplay there, because I think one of the things from a trading and markets perspective, I always think about what are my endpoints of risk, right? Where are my endpoints of risk? I think a lot of people are like, oh, stable coin means one coin equals $1. And that's what it should mean in theory, but you got to find out who's issuing that. Where are the dollars that are backing that? Is it a crypto-backed stable coin? How does that work? Where are the triggers? Where are the mechanisms? So for me, I'm always looking at how do I protect my book? Where is the risk I'm facing, and how am I pricing that? And then when you take that within the context of CBDCs, it's oh, so then if I have these stable coins and there's a bunch of CBDCs and these are devalued, am I going to lose money on this? Like, how do I manage this risk? So unfortunately, Sandra, I can't give you a really great answer on unpacking it, but those are the thoughts and concerns that are in my mind from a trading standpoint.
Well, you've actually explained perfectly that the situation is still very much TBD. Frankly, there are a lot of questions. And the fact that you've raised privacy and data privacy and personal privacy, that's a major issue. Dave, Justin, I'm going to go to you as well. But Dave, do you want to just speak on the privacy point? Because it is important. If I use cash, nobody knows where it came from. Nobody knows what I did with it. You know, so how is CBDC better?
Yeah, it's there's a paper currently being authored on this as part of the World Economic Forum DCGC effort. So you can stay tuned for some of that. But I guess I would start with make sure you understand the current context. So any cash transaction over $10,000 by law is reportable. So there's already a limit. Now, how frequently is that actually followed? Different point. But against that current construct of privacy, the U.S. has a distinct advantage based on our legal system around how this gets implemented. So if you assume that and this is our champion model that you'll read about in the paper, that a central bank digital currency by definition is issued, minted by the central bank or treasury or of a country, and they're responsible for implementing the appropriate laws, regulations, and policies into the system through which those CBDC tokens flow. And then the integration with stable coins and private constructs as being an important part of that. But that whole notion of by definition a CBDC has to be operated by audited, legally constrained, managed node operators. It could be directly the government. They could ordain others to be able to do it. But by definition, the systemically important infrastructure requirements and the laws and regulations and the whole definition of it being a central bank digital currency means that has to be the business logic has to be implemented within a system that's run, and authorized and managed by the government. In a U.S. context, our Second Amendment protections then actually create the legal basis by which that information that's flowing through that node architecture, that's flowing through the use of the tokens, cannot be used without just cause, cannot be accessed and the like. And so that may not provide comfort to all. If you're more on the libertarian end and you don't trust the government, then that's not gonna make you comfortable. But the basis in law says that they can't act on that information without a warrant or just cause. And so that's kind of the backdrop that's important. But the fun innovation frontier, I probably shouldn't use the word fun, the key innovation frontier here is we're spending a ton of time on privacy preserving compute, confidential compute, the design of that node architecture, the ability to both segregate, as well as encrypt data, the technology configuration choices around how we can increase the level of confidence that only the appropriate parties have access to the information of the transaction it's great and it's getting better and better every day, and it's a really important part of the innovation frontier. And so if I summarize, I think we've got a great construct to work with, in that we've got a legal basis by which to create the foundation of that privacy construct, where the government, we are, with other countries already, we're coding it such that unless you trip that threshold of if it's $10,000 or whatever it gets set to be, that below that mark, the data is not visible to anyone without a warrant. And above that mark, it is, as it is today with physical cash. So that's the baseline. And then some great policy choices ahead of us around how do we want to configure additional layers of the technology to be able to create further privacy constructs on top of that. And so the technology is highly configurable, and it's going to kick off a fantastic conversation. Maybe fantastic isn't the right word. It's going to kick off an intense conversation around what laws and regulations do we want to modernize, given the configurability of the technology to be able to do what seems to be a contradiction of simultaneously provide this, more decentralized construct, open construct, and yet private.
Right, and Justin, this actually gives us a good segue into what Justin and Stellar, some of the CBDC work you've been doing. Please, over to you, Justin.
Sure, yeah, I think you're right, Sandra, when you said this is TBD, and I think it's interesting to hear, David and everyone else sort of talk about the questions. There are the questions that still exist around privacy, around the sort of laws of and that sort of found are necessary to actually issue this, to have a central bank issue a digital currency, right? And I think that we don't know exactly what central bank digital currencies will look like. All of these different suggestions, I think, will move us closer towards consensus, towards an answer. But even then, I think different central banks in different countries will have different approaches, right? They'll have different things that they hold dear, or that they feel necessary, or that they feel are required by their local laws. And so I think we won't see a single solution, right? For me, from the SDF perspective, and we do consult with various organizations and even with government entities about CBDCs, like, I really hope that they don't all end up siloed on private networks. Like, I just think about the current financial system and the problems that causes when you try to convert currency or make payments across borders. And I just feel like what I hope is that there is a way to sort of have all of the good and all of the necessary stuff to abide by the laws, but also to somehow connect to a common public network that allows, again, interoperability. And so I feel like that is the challenge from our perspective, is to find a way to try to make CBDCs actually interact with a public ledger. And not only for the interoperability reason, but also because I think that allows them to take advantage of the whole innovative space and all that everyone is bringing to it, rather than just being just this one national currency.
Thank you very much for that. And I cannot believe we've blown through an hour already, and we haven't even touched on DeFi. We have DeFi questions. We have questions on Dogecoin. Some people are very upset about, the fact that it's doing what it's doing. Yeah, we hear you. We also have questions around other industries. We barely scratched the surface on supply chain. And there's digital identity questions. We clearly can do a whole nother session. And if you guys want it, let us know, let the blockchain clubs know, we'll come back. But this was a first step into a conversation with the leaders and practitioners in the space. I'm gonna do a quick run with everyone. If you were to highlight one thing for the audience that's coming in 2021, is it digital identity? Is it the CBDC point? Is it what's sort of a big thing that you're looking at on the horizon for the blockchain and crypto space? Let's start with Tanya, from an enterprise perspective.
Yes, I will say that's, a bit of a hard question to answer specifically, right? I mean, what exactly can we look forward to in the next year? I will say, at least from my perspective, given the advances on the financial services side of the house, I totally expect a lot more production use cases around things like, multi-party transactions of all sorts, whether it's repo transactions, whether it's some clearing and settlement of large volume stock exchanges. We'll see those come to bear fairly rapidly over the next year. Some of the others, I'd say supply chain, healthcare, and others would follow suit.
Okay, watch out for financial services. It will continue to dominate innovation, and it makes sense. It's been around longer and evolved longer than some of the other industries. B, over to you.
I think ownership. I think it's becoming more and more clear that one of the core tenets of crypto is owning your own value and economic sovereignty. And I think that's becoming clear, and our infrastructure is being built such that people actually can do it without it being, I think one of the questions were like, it's so onerous and it's so hard to tap. And we're working really, really hard, even though it doesn't seem like that to the world, we're working really hard to make it easier to buy, hold, store, and trade your own value.
Absolutely. Justin.
I'm really looking forward to more innovative solutions to liquidity problems. I think if everyone owns their own assets and they want to be able to swap them out or sort of connect with all the other assets in the world, you know, B can't make every market, right? So all of these people, all these mechanisms out there that allow markets to get made where they can't be right now are really going to open up this ability to transmute assets.
Awesome. Love it. And Dave, round us out.
I think two things. If I continue with the dialogue with Justin, I couldn't agree more. I think the interplay between CBDC and stablecoin in particular, and obviously crypto as an extension, is critical, right? If you think about the innovation frontier, I think we want, again, personal view here in terms of what we're building. I don't think we should be having central banks get creative with applying business logic to tokens. I think it should be a very, very narrow and focused scope at the core of a central bank digital currency, and then leave it to private enterprise to get wildly creative around how the embedding of business logic into stablecoins can drive incredible, social impact, humanitarian, environmental, disaster relief, benefits distribution, like the frontier of being able to embed business logic into payment and currency tokens, I think is phenomenal. And so the interplay between the two is then critical, right? In terms of those on-ramps, off-ramps, and relationships. So I would look for that. And then the second one I would reference, and it was some of the questions, and I think the follow-on session, the interplay between digital identity and digital currency is just absolutely critical, right? Just as I'm carrying my driver's license about a millimeter from my cash in my wallet, I need that same ability to, in the digital world, to be able to have my identity serve appropriately in the transactions with privacy, with effectiveness, and be able to have a single wallet infrastructure, right? I think it'll be incredibly dystopian if we end up with a zillion wallets on our phones. It's just not, it can't be the answer, right? So the whole notion of common wallet infrastructure to be able to then traverse whatever type of digital currency or digital identity, health passport, vaccine passports, all over the news right now. All of a token's a token. You need to be able to manage it in a single wallet structure, just like you do in the physical world right now with slots for all of your credit cards, driver's licenses, and cash. We need that kind of thinking around how to have the same common capability in the digital world. There are lots of us focused on how to do that.
Thank you so much, each of you, for your valuable time and insights. I hope the audience has figured out by now that we have a lot of work to do in a lot of different areas. So greenfield opportunities, get stuck in wherever you find interest. And frankly, it'll take you to another area. It'll take you to another area, and it'll just keep unfolding. There's multi-layers to this adventure that we're all on. So feel free to reach out, be curious, and thank you again for your time. Handing it back over to Sophia.
Just to echo Sandra's comments, thank you all so much for joining us today. This has been an excellent way to kick off the GBBC's University Dialogues. To our speakers, thank you. To our partners, and to the students, professors, and enthusiasts who joined today and for your insightful questions. I will say, take the opportunity to follow these companies and their leaders online and the GBBC to get involved with the initiatives and open access materials that they have. Lastly, to anyone who joined today, if you'd like to have the GBBC University Dialogues come to your campus, drop us a line. We look forward to working with all of you. And a recording of this will be made available online as well. So thank you to everyone, and good night or good afternoon or good morning. We'll see you soon.